Have you ever wondered why silence feels more healing than some conversations? Or why being alone can feel safer than being surrounded by people? In a world obsessed with social connection, the truth is quietly hiding in plain sight. Not all connection is growth. Some people poison you with a smile. And sometimes, the greatest act of self-preservation is retreat. Let's begin with a scenario that hits home. You walk into a room full of people, laughter echoing off the walls. But something inside you tightens. You can't explain it. It's not what they're saying, it's what they're not saying. Their energy enters you like static noise. You feel drained within minutes. This right here is the beginning of the great philosophical contradiction of our age. We crave belonging, but we also ache to escape it. Why? Because what we call belonging often turns into silent compromise. Toxicity isn't always loud or violent, it's subtle, it's performative, it's invisible until it's unbearable. Most people don't realize this until it's too late. Until they've given pieces of themselves away, thinking that's what love, loyalty, or community demands. But what if I told you, being alone is not loneliness, it's clarity.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
There's a reason why prophets, sages, and thinkers from Laozi to Nietzsche embraced solitude. Not because they hated people, but because solitude is where reality stops lying to you. In the absence of external noise, the internal voice becomes deafeningly honest. Toxic people, on the other hand, feed on distraction. They distort your clarity. They mirror back not your truth, but your shame. And the longer you stay, the more your inner compass bends to their storm. Let me ask you a brutal question. Have you ever felt guilty for outgrowing someone? We've been trained to associate loyalty with permanence, but true loyalty is to truth, not to people who manipulate you into shrinking. Some people aren't in your life to grow with you. They're there to test whether you'll keep lowering your light to keep them comfortable. And that's where the power of being alone begins. Being alone is not a punishment, it's a purification. When you step away from the noise, you begin to detox not just from others, but from your own conditioned need to please, explain, and prove yourself. Toxic people survive by feeding off your doubt. Solitude starves them. In silence, their words stop echoing. In stillness, their chaos stops mattering. You finally hear your own thoughts, and they're not as cruel as you thought. Isn't it strange that many of us trust others more than we trust ourselves? It's because we've outsourced our validation. We ask others, am I enough? Do I belong? Is this okay? But solitude reverses the question, do they deserve your presence? You see, when you're constantly surrounded by toxic energy, your nervous system adapts. Hypervigilance becomes your default state. You overthink every word. You second-guess your feelings. You perform safety instead of living authenticity. You forget what peace feels like until you find it in aloneness. But here's the deeper philosophical trap. We confuse aloneness with emptiness. We've been programmed to believe that silence is a void, that no text means rejection, that no invitation means insignificance. This is the illusion society sells to keep you desperate for connection, any connection, even if it corrodes you. But silence isn't empty. It's full of truth. Think about this. Why do animals withdraw to heal? Why do spiritual awakenings begin in deserts, forests, and caves? because healing cannot happen where you were hurt. Toxic environments demand constant defense, but constant translation. You cannot reflect if you're always reacting. Solitude is where defense systems dissolve, where you remember that your worth is not a debate, that your boundaries are not burdens, but your truth doesn't require approval. Let's go deeper. Imagine you're standing at a cliff. Behind you are all the people who told you that changing is betrayal, that choosing peace is selfish, that walking away is abandonment. And in front of you, silence, vast, echoing solitude. Nothing guaranteed, just you. Most people turn back. But the ones who don't, those are the ones who finally learn the difference between being alone and being free. Do you know how many people never meet their real selves because they're too busy performing someone else's version of them? Solitude is where masks fall. You cry without interruption. You dream without judgment. You remember who you were before the world taught you to be palatable. And the pain of losing others fades next to the joy of finally finding yourself. But still, let's be honest, it hurts. Aloneness brings grief. Not just of people, but of illusions. You realize some people never loved you. They loved your usefulness. They never saw you. They saw their projection. Letting that go. That's spiritual death. But it's also rebirth. And it's this paradox, this dark night of the soul, that births true selfhood. So why do so many people stay in toxic circles? Why do we keep going back to the fire that burns us? Because trauma bonds feel like home. If chaos was your normal, then peace feels boring. If invalidation was love, then self-worth feels foreign. But if you dare to stay alone long enough, something wild happens. Your body recalibrates. Your spirit expands. You begin to feel not just numb, to live not just perform, to choose not just comply. Let me ask you something radical. What if solitude is not the absence of people, but the presence of God? Call it source, call it truth, call it your higher self. But there's something profoundly divine about the space you create when you walk away from toxicity. And that space becomes sacred, not because it's comfortable, but because it's honest. And honesty, raw, terrifying, unfiltered honesty is what heals. Let's ground this in a real-world test. Take one day, just one, and turn off the noise. No social media, no people-pleasing, no performative conversations. Just you, your journal, and your breath. See what rises. Watch how discomfort transforms into clarity. Watch how the absence of chaos doesn't feel empty, it feels like coming home. Because the deepest truth is this: being alone can save your life. Not in the dramatic movie scene way, but in the slow, sacred unraveling of false identities. It saves the part of you that's been whispering, "I miss me." It saves your boundaries, your purpose, your energy. It saves your soul from becoming a dumping ground for others' projections. And in that stillness, a final realization arises: you were never too much. You were just around people who wanted you smaller. Solitude, at first, feels like exile. You stand on the threshold of your own mind and hear echoes, distant voices telling you you're selfish, cold, broken. You remember every time someone accused you of being too sensitive, too quiet, too intense, as if your depth was a defect. But then, something shifts. The silence stops shouting. it begins to sing. And what it sings is freedom, not the kind handed to you by society, but the kind you dig out of the rubble of your former self with your own bare hands. You begin to notice that the tightness in your chest is gone. The way you used to rehearse your words, the way your stomach clenched when your phone lit up with their name vanished. You are no longer a character in someone else's story. You are the author of your own. And this reclamation of authorship is what makes solitude sacred. Not because you reject the world, but because you finally remember how to live without it owning you. You wake up and your breath feels different, not rushed, not anxious, just present. You look around your room and there is no one to impress, no one to perform for, no one to apologize to for simply existing. In that space, the seeds of true power are sown, not control over others, but sovereignty over your inner world. Toxic people make you doubt your intuition. Being alone teaches you to trust it like your heartbeat. You learn to feel the difference between peace and silence, between comfort and complacency. And most of all, you learn the language of your own soul, the way your energy rises when something aligns, and the way it contracts when something violates your truth. You stop needing explanations. You stop begging to be understood. You simply are. And that is where the true miracle begins. Because as you spend time alone, not lonely, but alone, you realize you've been living inside a prison built from polite compliance. Every "it's okay" when it wasn't, every "I understand" when you didn't, every smile that hid a scream, these were the bricks. And now you're tearing it down, brick by brick, lie by lie, memory by memory. You start saying things like, "No, I don't accept that," or "This doesn't feel right," or "I need space." And instead of explaining, you just walk away. That's power. Not noise, not revenge. Just quiet, grounded boundaries that make people who benefited from your silence very, very uncomfortable. But here's where it gets even more powerful. Solitude doesn't just clear out the toxic, it attracts the sacred. The more you say no to what drains you, the more life sends you what nourishes you. You meet people who don't demand small talk, who speak the language of presence. You start having conversations where you don't have to translate your soul. You meet relationships, friends, lovers, mentors who honor your depth instead of fearing it. And you realize something that breaks your heart open in gratitude. You never needed to be saved. You just needed space to remember you were whole all along. Now, some people will see your solitude and call it a phase. Some will call it bitterness, pride, stubbornness. Let them. Their opinion of your boundaries is none of your business. What matters is this: you didn't choose to be alone because you hate people. You chose to be alone because you finally stopped hating yourself enough to keep letting the wrong people stay. You realized that tolerating toxicity is not compassion, but it's self-abandonment. And you're done with that forever. Still, the shadows remain. Late at night, you might feel waves of grief crash through your chest. You'll miss people who were never really there. You'll mourn connections that never truly saw you. And that mourning is holy. Because it's not just the people you're letting go of, it's the version of you who accepted breadcrumbs, who begged for affection, who smiled through pain. You're grieving a former self, and in that sacred grief, you birth the new you, the real you. The one who doesn't beg, doesn't chase, doesn't shrink. The one who says, I'd rather be alone in truth than surrounded in lies. Here's a secret most won't tell you. Power is quiet. Real power doesn't roar. It hums. It radiates. It walks into a room without needing to prove a thing. And that power is built in solitude, not in loud affirmations or curated Instagram posts, but in the quiet moment where you decide to not answer that text, to not go to that event, to not fake laugh, to not lower your standards, just to not be alone. Every time you choose yourself over the performance, you're building a life that honors your soul. That's not isolation, that's alignment. So what happens when you emerge from this season of solitude? You walk differently, you speak differently, you no longer over-explain, you no longer fear loss. You understand that if your peace costs you people, it's a bargain. You no longer attract toxicity because your frequency no longer matches it. You walk away not in anger, but in grace. You don't burn bridges, you simply stop crossing them. You don't fight to be heard, you walk where your truth is already understood. But the greatest reward of all, you become a sanctuary. Not just for yourself, but for others who are healing too. Your presence becomes medicine. Your boundaries become a lighthouse. You become the proof that solitude doesn't kill you, it resurrects you. You begin to teach, not with words, but with how you live. You show others that there is life after letting go, that there is peace after the storm, that there is self after self-abandonment. And that's how solitude becomes the gateway, not just to survival, but to sovereignty. So ask you one final, haunting question. What if the person you're afraid to become the one who says no, who chooses silence, but who walks away is the most powerful version of you that's ever existed? The truth is, you don't need closure from people who never gave you clarity. You don't need applause for walking away. You don't even need understanding. You just need courage. The courage to sit in the silence. The courage to let the noise pass. The courage to not chase what confuses you. Because confusion is not love. Doubt is not connection. Draining is not destiny. You deserve peace that doesn't come at the cost of your sanity. You deserve love that doesn't ask you to betray yourself. You deserve solitude that heals, not crowds that distract. So be alone. Let it strip you. Let it clean you. Let it reveal the roots of your true power. And when you emerge, you will no longer seek protection from others. You will be the storm, the shelter, and the sky. Because in the end, being alone didn't break you. It saved you. And the life you build from here will never again require you to shrink just to survive. You're done surviving. Now you live.